Hello, I'm Keith Howes and I was the features editor of London Gay News from 1976 until 1979. David Hockney was always one of my idols. He was England's most famous painter apart from Francis Bacon, and of course one of the few openly gay men that we had as role models during that time. And it was obvious that if anyone was going to be the first interviewee for the New Gay News, the New Gay newspaper, it was going to be David Hockney, and so it was. So in number 2, Dennis Lemon, the editor or a member of the collective at the time, interviewed David Hockney. Good interview about his attitude to living in America, his attitude to living in Britain, and his love of the gay world, but not the gay scene. He said he wasn't a drinker, he didn't go into pubs, he didn't pick people up, etc., etc. And so when we had our 100th edition in 1976, David Hockney was obviously the first choice for our interviewee, and I went round to see him, and I was very disappointed. It was like seeing a puppet. It was like seeing a David Hockney puppet. The Yorkshire accent, the hooded eyes, the slow delivery, and not actually answering the questions and just doing everything by rote. I came away deeply disappointed. I felt that I'd done a really bad job, and I wanted to do really well because this was our birthday celebration issue. So I did something I've never done before. I asked to come back. I asked to have a second go at interviewing him. And I went round there, and his former lover, the gorgeous American Peter Schlesinger, was actually watering the garden. It was a very, very hot summer. 1976 was one of Britain's hottest summers. They were frying eggs on the pavement, I remember. And of course, in our little sweatbox in Gay News, it was very, very difficult to work. David Hockney was much more gracious this time, and somehow we just connected. And he told me about very intimate details of his life, particularly with Peter Schlesinger, who had been his lover for a few years, and his sadness and depression for the 2 or 3 years after it broke up. He said that he often wanted to make love in the morning. He was very much a morning person, but Peter wasn't interested. Peter was interested at night, and David was just too tired. Little things like that, and talking about underpants, and also about pornography, because I'd recently interviewed a director of porn called Peter Jerome. We call the article Confessions of a Porno Director. Peter Jerome is a terribly proper Englishman who in fact was responsible for the very last screen appearance of Greta Garbo. But that's another story. You have to read the article to find out how she got into one of his porno films. But David Hockney had this thing about porno which I shared, which is if there's no story, there's no eroticism. There has to be some degree of immersion into the characters and why they're doing what they're doing. What was interesting was that David was painting a picture of his parents, his mother and his father, not looking at each other, one looking out at the audience and the other looking in profile, and in the middle a bunch of tulips and David himself looking in a reflection in the mirror of David. It was fascinating, and of course it brings up all sorts of questions about the gay child with the parents who don't really understand. They come from a different world, and the gay son is really just a reflection in the mirror. And the picture wasn't actually finished for about 3 or 4 years because he keeps changing, he keeps rubbing out, he keeps bringing in different characters, different objects. And it, I suppose, taught me the absolute genius of the artist, how painstaking it is to be an artist. And he reminded me of Bernard Shaw's famous quote, "The single-minded should remain single," and how true that is. I found talking with David very comforting, soothing, a sweet, sweet man, a loving man, a kind man, but of course a single-minded artist who really couldn't handle relationships, a total romantic, and doomed in a way to eternal loneliness. That is the artist, the true artist.